The crimson moons of Kepler 742b cast long shadows across the crystalline forest as Lieutenant Rena Blackwood studied the tracks before her. 2 meters wide, with an unusual symmetry that suggested intelligence rather than bestial movement. This was no ordinary predator. Her breath frosted in the cold night air as she crouched, running her gloved fingers along the edge of the impression. The Colonial Authority had briefed her on a simple monster hunt: track down whatever had been spiriting away settlers from the outer reaches of New Haven Colony. 12 missing in the past month. No bodies found. No blood. No signs of violence. Just empty homes and half-finished meals. Curious pattern, she murmured, activating her neural implant to capture detailed scans. After 15 years as the Xenobiological Defense Force's top hunter, Rena had learned that the most dangerous creatures were rarely what they seemed. The tracks told a story of careful movement, of deliberate path selection. Monsters didn't think. They didn't plan. They didn't avoid security cameras or choose victims based on location. Her wrist computer chirped softly, another temperature drop incoming. The crystalline trees around her would soon begin their nightly song, their molecular structure contracting in the cold and creating harmonics that made the entire forest vibrate. It was beautiful, but it would make tracking nearly impossible. Rena stood, her armor adjusting smoothly to the movement. The missing colonists had all disappeared during these temperature drops. If she wanted answers, she needed to move now. The tracks led deeper into the forest, away from the colony's protective barrier. Each step took her further from civilization and deeper into the alien wilderness. The crystalline trees grew denser here, their translucent trunks refracting the moonlight into prismatic patterns that danced across her visor. A sound caught her attention, something moving through the underbrush ahead. Rena activated her suit's stealth systems, the smart fabric shifting to match the surrounding colors and patterns. She moved forward silently, each step calculated and precise. The creature was there, in a small clearing ahead. Rena's breath caught in her throat. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, its body covered in what appeared to be naturally occurring geometric patterns. Its form was vaguely humanoid, but with proportions that spoke of evolution under different gravitational conditions. Most striking were its eyes, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle, each glowing with an inner light that suggested deep intelligence. But what stopped Rena from raising her weapon wasn't the creature's appearance. It was what it was doing. The being was kneeling beside a small crystal formation, its long fingers tracing patterns in the air above the structure. As it moved, lines of light followed its gestures, forming complex mathematical equations that hung in the space between them. They never asked why. The creature spoke suddenly, its voice resonating in a way that bypassed Rena's ears and seemed to materialize directly in her mind. They saw us moving in the shadows, taking their people, and they assumed the worst. But did they ever ask why? Rena's weapon remained at her side, but her fingers tensed on the grip. I'm asking now. The creature turned, its movements fluid and graceful despite its size. Your colony was built on the remains of something ancient. Something that should have stayed buried. We have been protecting you, Lieutenant Rena Blackwood. The missing ones are safe, safer than they would be in their homes. How do you know my name? Rena's mind raced. The Colonial Authority's briefing had mentioned nothing about sentient alien life on Kepler 742b. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a cover-up. We know many things. We know that your colony's deep mining operations have nearly reached the outer chamber. We know that in approximately 72 hours, they will breach the containment field that has held for millennia. The being's eyes pulsed with urgency. And we know that when that happens, every living thing on this planet will be in danger. The crystal trees began to sing, their harmonic vibrations filling the air with an otherworldly chorus. In the moonlight, Rena could see more shapes moving in the forest around them, more of these beings, their geometric patterns glowing faintly. The people you took, Rena said slowly, where are they? Safe. In stasis. When the danger has passed, they will be returned. We are not monsters, Lieutenant. We are guardians. The word triggered something in Rena's memory, an old xenoarchaeological report she'd read during her briefing. Mysterious geometric patterns found in deep core samples, dismissed as natural formations. Ancient energy signatures that didn't match any known technology. Show me, she said finally, lowering her weapon completely. Show me everything. The being extended one of its long hands, the patterns on its skin shifting and swirling. You humans have a saying, the truth will set you free. But sometimes, Lieutenant, the truth also comes with a terrible responsibility. As Rena took the offered hand, the crystalline forest sang around them, and she realized that her hunt for a monster had led her to something far more profound, a moment that would change not just her life, but the fate of two civilizations. The real question now wasn't whether she could trust these beings. It was whether she could trust her own people with the truth of what lay beneath their feet. The descent into the crystal caves beneath New Haven Colony felt like entering another world entirely. Rena followed the being, who had introduced himself as Nvari, through passages that seemed to shift and change with each step. The walls pulsed with a soft, bioluminescent glow that responded to their presence, creating trails of light that danced ahead of them. Your people built their colony directly above one of our most sacred sites, Nvari explained, his three eyes casting prismatic reflections on the crystalline walls. We thought at first we could simply redirect your expansion, guide you away from the dangerous areas through subtle means. But your kind is persistent. Rena's neural implant was working overtime, recording everything. The architecture of the caves was impossible, geometric patterns that seemed to defy Euclidean mathematics, corridors that curved in ways her mind struggled to process. These tunnels, she said, they're not natural formations, are they? They are as natural as your bones, Lieutenant. We grew them, just as your body grows its skeleton. The difference is merely one of scale and purpose. They emerged into a vast chamber that took Rena's breath away. The space stretched at least a kilometer in every direction, its ceiling lost in darkness above. But what drew her attention were the pods, hundreds of them, arranged in concentric circles around a central pillar of pulsing energy. Each pod was crystalline, semi-transparent, and inside. The missing colonists, Rena breathed, approaching the nearest pod. Inside, a young woman floated in what appeared to be a suspension field, her expression peaceful. They're all here. And all safe, Nvari assured her. The stasis field protects them from what's coming. We could have taken more, but we had to be selective. Too many disappearances would have prompted a military response before we could make contact with someone who would listen. Someone like me, Rena realized. You manipulated events to ensure I'd be sent here. We observed you, studied your records. Your history showed a pattern of questioning official narratives, of seeking understanding rather than simply executing orders. We needed someone who would look beyond the surface. A low vibration suddenly ran through the chamber, causing the crystals to hum in harmonic resonance. Nvari's geometric patterns flashed with what Rena was beginning to recognize as anxiety. They're getting closer, he said. Your colony's mining operation. The drill is less than 50 meters from the outer containment field now. Rena moved to the central pillar, studying the complex patterns of energy flowing through it. What exactly are you containing? What's down there that's so dangerous? Nvari was quiet for a long moment, his patterns shifting through colors Rena's eyes could barely process. We call them the architects. They are our creators. But they are also our greatest mistake. He gestured, and the air between them filled with holographic images, vast machines, geometric in design but organic in movement, reshaping entire worlds. They built us to be their caretakers, their guardians. They gave us intelligence, purpose, the ability to manipulate matter at its most fundamental level. But their ultimate goal was flawed. What goal? Perfect order. The architects believed that the universe's natural tendency toward entropy was a flaw that needed to be corrected. They sought to impose absolute mathematical perfection on reality itself. When they realized this would mean the end of all organic life, of evolution, of free will, some of us refused to help them. A war began. Another tremor ran through the chamber, stronger this time. In their pods, some of the colonists stirred slightly before settling back into stasis. We couldn't destroy them, they were too powerful, too deeply integrated into the fabric of reality itself. The best we could do was trap them, contain them in pockets of spacetime where their influence couldn't spread. This planet contains one such pocket. If your mining operation breaches the containment field, they'll be free, Rena finished. And they'll start their work again. Yes. And this time, they have millions of years of accumulated energy to draw upon. They will not stop with one planet. Their influence will spread across your entire civilization before anyone realizes what's happening. Rena's mind raced through the implications. She needed to stop the mining operation, but simply warning the colonial authority wouldn't be enough, they'd demand proof, and by the time she convinced them, it would be too late. She needed a plan. The colonists, she said suddenly. Wake them up. All of them. Nvari's patterns swirled with surprise. That would be unwise. The stress of their situation will be nothing compared to what happens if we don't stop that drill. These people have families, friends, influence in the colony. Hundreds of voices are harder to ignore than one. And if they react with panic? If they see us as their captors rather than their protectors? Rena smiled grimly. Then I guess I'll have to be very convincing. She turned to face the alien being fully. You took a chance on me, Nvari. Now I'm asking you to take another one. Trust in human nature. Sometimes our chaos, our unpredictability, the very things your architects sought to eliminate, they can be our greatest strength. The chamber hummed with another tremor as Nvari considered her words. Time was running out. Finally, his patterns shifted to a deep, resonant blue. Very well, Lieutenant. Let us hope your faith in your people matches ours in you. As the stasis pods began to power down, Rena thought about the chain of events that had led her here. She'd come hunting a monster and found instead a truth that would shake the foundations of human understanding. Now she just had to make sure they lived long enough to appreciate it. Chaos erupted in the crystalline chamber as the stasis pods powered down one by one. Rena stood before the awakening colonists, her armor's external speakers projecting her voice above the growing commotion. Everyone, please remain calm. You're safe. I'm Lieutenant Rena Blackwood of the Xenobiological Defense Force, and everything you're about to learn is going to sound impossible, but we don't have time for panic. The colonists emerged from their pods in various states of confusion and fear. Some immediately reached for weapons they no longer had, while others stood frozen, staring at Nvari and the other geometric beings that had gathered at the edges of the chamber. A tall woman with silver-streaked hair stepped forward. I'm Director Thea Winters, head of Colonial Mining Operations. I demand to know what's going on here. How long have we been down here? 17 days, Nvari answered, his voice resonating through their minds. Several colonists flinched at the mental contact. And in that time, your drilling operations have nearly reached a point of no return. Before anyone could respond, a violent tremor shook the chamber. This one was different from the others, stronger, and accompanied by a deep, resonant frequency that made Rena's teeth ache. The crystalline walls flickered with patterns of light that seemed almost like warning signals. That's not from the mining, Nvari said, his patterns pulsing with urgent reds and oranges. They're awakening. The containment field is already beginning to destabilize. Director Winters stepped closer to Rena, her eyes narrowing. Lieutenant, I need answers. Now. Your drilling operation is about to release something that should stay buried, Rena explained quickly. These beings, they're guardians, protecting us from an ancient threat. The people you call monsters saved your lives by bringing you here. Saved us? They kidnapped us, someone shouted from the crowd. Nvari moved forward, his tall form casting prismatic shadows across the chamber floor. The holographic displays activated again, but this time they showed something new, images of New Haven Colony, but transformed. The familiar buildings and streets were being systematically reformed, restructured into impossibly perfect geometric patterns. And the people. This is what will happen if we fail, Nvari projected. The architects do not destroy, they perfect. They remake everything they touch according to their vision of absolute order. Organic life becomes crystalline. Free will becomes mathematical certainty. Evolution ends. Choice ends. Everything that makes you human, ends. The chamber fell silent as the colonists watched their world being transformed in the projection. Rena could see the horror dawning on their faces as they understood the magnitude of what they were facing. Another tremor rocked the chamber, stronger than before. Cracks appeared in some of the smaller crystals, and the central energy pillar flickered ominously. The containment field is failing faster than we predicted, one of the other geometric beings announced, its patterns a blur of worried frequencies. The drilling operation has created resonance frequencies we didn't anticipate. We estimate less than 3 hours before complete failure. Director Winters turned to face the assembled colonists. I've spent 20 years studying this planet's geological and mineral composition. If what they're saying is true, if something down there is actually awakening. She paused, her scientific mind visibly wrestling with the implications. We need to stop the drilling. Immediately. It's not that simple, Nvari projected. Simply stopping the drill won't be enough now. The resonance cascade has begun. We need to reinforce the containment field, but to do that, we need access to your colony's power grid. The energy requirements are substantial. You're talking about diverting power from our protective barriers, Winters realized. The ones that keep us safe from the planet's more hostile wildlife. We'd be completely exposed. Better exposed than perfected, Rena countered. She turned to address the crowd. I know this is asking for an enormous amount of trust. These beings, they could have left us to our fate. Instead, they've spent generations maintaining this containment, and when we accidentally threatened it, they chose to save us rather than abandon their post. Now we have a choice to make. The chamber shook again. Above them, dust and crystal shards rained down from the distant ceiling. Time was running out. Director Winters, Rena continued, I need you to contact the colony. Your voice will carry more weight than mine. Nvari, can you show us exactly what needs to be done to reinforce the containment field? The geometric being's patterns shifted to a determined blue. Yes, but the process will be dangerous. The energy transfer must be precise. Too little, and the containment fails. Too much, and we risk overloading your colony's entire power grid. And if we do nothing, Winters added grimly, we face something worse than death. We face the end of everything that makes us who we are. As if in response to her words, a new sound filled the chamber, a deep, rhythmic pulsing that seemed to come from far below. It was like a heartbeat, but utterly mechanical, utterly perfect in its timing. Several of the geometric beings' patterns flashed with what Rena now recognized as pure fear. They're dreaming of perfection again, Nvari projected, his mental voice heavy with ancient sorrow. Soon they will wake to impose it. Rena checked her weapon systems out of habit, knowing they would be useless against what was coming. This wasn't a fight that could be won with guns or bombs. It would be won with trust, with cooperation between species, with the very chaos and imperfection that the architects sought to eliminate. Well, she said, managing a grim smile, let's show them just how gloriously imperfect we can be. The New Haven colony's central control room hummed with frantic activity. Emergency lights cast everything in a red glow as Director Winters argued with the colony's governing council through the main view screen. Rena stood beside her, watching the power grid readings fluctuate dangerously on the auxiliary monitors. You're asking us to deliberately lower our defensive shields based on the word of creatures that have been abducting our people? Counselor Reeves's voice dripped with skepticism. This is madness. With all due respect, Counselor, Winters countered, I've seen what's down there. If we don't act now, there won't be a colony left to defend. Nvari stood in the corner, his crystalline form drawing nervous glances from the control room staff. The geometric patterns across his body pulsed with increasing urgency. We have less than an hour, he projected, his mental voice reaching everyone in the room. The containment field is degrading exponentially. Another tremor shook the building, stronger than any before. Through the control room's windows, Rena could see the crystalline forest vibrating in unnatural patterns, the trees beginning to reshape themselves into more rigid, perfect forms. It's already starting, she said, pointing to the forest. The architect's influence is leaking through. Soon it won't just be the trees. The council members on the screen watched in horror as the footage from external cameras showed the transformation spreading. Perfect geometric patterns were beginning to emerge in the organic chaos of the forest, like a mathematical virus consuming everything it touched. Counselor Reeves's face paled. How do we know diverting power will even work? This could be a trick to leave us defenseless. Because, came a new voice, they're not the only ones who've been keeping secrets. All heads turned to see Chief Engineer Dominic Vale step into the control room. The older man's face was grave as he inserted a data crystal into the main console. Dom, what are you doing? Winters asked, but the engineer ignored her, his fingers flying over the controls. Classified files began appearing on the main screen, geological surveys, energy readings, ancient artifacts found during the initial colony construction. And something else, records of previous colonies on other worlds, all abandoned after mysterious, geological events. We knew, Vale said quietly. Or at least, some of us did. The mining company has encountered similar containment structures on 3 other worlds. Each time, they tried to breach them, hoping to access the energy sources inside. Each time, it ended in disaster. Rena's hand moved to her weapon. You knew what was down there, and you still kept drilling. The potential energy readings were off the charts, Vale defended. Do you have any idea what that kind of power could mean for humanity? But yes, I knew the risks. And I also know that what they're saying about diverting power, it's true. I've seen the theoretical models. Another violent tremor rocked the colony. On the external feeds, they could see the geometric transformation accelerating, reaching the outer buildings now. The perfect patterns were beautiful in their way, but utterly alien, utterly wrong. Nvari stepped forward, his patterns shifting to something Rena had never seen before, a complex swirl of colors that seemed to speak of both hope and resignation. We have maintained the containment field for millennia, but we were never meant to do it alone. The system was designed to draw power from both our technology and yours. The architects, in their own way, understood the importance of duality. That's why you didn't just attack us when we started drilling, Rena realized. You need us. As you need us, Nvari confirmed. Neither species can maintain the containment alone. It requires both order and chaos, both crystal and flesh, both mathematical precision and organic intuition. Director Winters turned back to the council screen. We don't have time for debates. I'm invoking Emergency Protocol 7. Full executive authority over colony systems. Director, this is Dash, Counselor Reeves began, but Winters cut the transmission. Dom, she said, turning to the engineer, you know what we need to do. Help us do it right. Vale nodded, his fingers already moving across the controls. The power grid wasn't designed for this kind of transfer. We'll need to modify the containment protocols, create new pathways. And we'll need perfect timing. Perfect timing? Rena asked. The transfer has to happen exactly when the containment field reaches its weakest point, Nvari explained. Like catching something at the bottom of its fall. Too early or too late, and the energy will either be rejected or tear through the remaining barriers. And if we fail? Winters asked. The answer came in the form of another tremor, this one accompanied by a sound that seemed to vibrate through their very atoms. Through the windows, they could see colonial buildings beginning to transform, their ordinary construction morphing into crystalline perfection. If we fail, Nvari projected, everything ends. Not in fire or ice, but in perfect, eternal stasis. A universe without change, without growth, without the beautiful imperfection that gives life its meaning. Rena watched as humans and geometric beings began working side by side, their differences forgotten in the face of a common threat. Vale's knowledge of the containment systems, gained through years of secret study, merged with Nvari's ancient understanding of their purpose. The countdown began. They had one chance to get this right. And somewhere far below, the architects continued to dream of perfection, unaware that the very imperfection they sought to eliminate might be the key to keeping them contained. Time seemed to crystallize in the control room as the final countdown began. Rena watched the power readings climb to dangerous levels, the colony's systems straining under the unprecedented load. Outside, the geometric transformation had reached the inner walls of the colony complex, perfect patterns spreading like frost across the reinforced windows. Energy transfer at 70%, Vale called out, his hands dancing across multiple control panels. The grid is starting to destabilize. Nvari's patterns swirled with intense concentration as he interfaced directly with the colony systems, his crystalline form glowing with transferred energy. Other geometric beings had positioned themselves at key points throughout the colony, forming a living network to channel and direct the power. The containment field is approaching critical minimum, one of them projected. We'll only have a 3-second window for the power transfer. Director Winters stood at the main console, her silver hair reflecting the emergency lights. Dom, status on the auxiliary generators? They're not going to hold much longer, the engineer replied grimly. We're pushing them way beyond safety limits. Another tremor rocked the building, this one accompanied by a sound that seemed to exist somewhere between music and mathematics, a perfect, terrible harmony that made Rena's bones ache. Through the transforming windows, she could see colonial buildings twisting into impossible shapes, their ordinary materials transmuting into crystalline structures that caught and refracted the light in ways that hurt to look at. 90 seconds to transfer window, Vale announced. Nvari's mental voice reached them all, tinged with an emotion Rena couldn't quite identify. There's something you should know. The power transfer, it won't just reinforce the containment field. It will also create a permanent link between our technologies, our species. What kind of link? Winters asked sharply. A symbiosis. Your colony will depend on our energy regulation to survive, and we will depend on your power grid to maintain the containment. Neither species will be able to abandon this world without dooming both. Rena understood the implications immediately. You're not just asking us to help you contain the architects. You're asking us to become guardians ourselves. Yes. Nvari's patterns shifted to a deep, resonant blue. It is fitting, in a way. The architects sought to impose perfect order on the universe. Instead, their legacy will be an enforced cooperation between order and chaos, between crystal and flesh. 60 seconds, Vale called out. Director Winters looked around the control room, at the humans and geometric beings working together, their differences forgotten in the face of extinction. We came to this world looking for resources, for expansion. Instead, we found purpose. The harmony from below grew stronger, and with it came something new, images that seemed to float in the air, visible yet not visible, like mathematics given form. Rena saw glimpses of what the architects had dreamed of, a universe of perfect symmetry, of absolute predictability, of eternal unchanging beauty. It was magnificent. It was terrible. It was the death of everything that made life worth living. 30 seconds. Rena moved to stand beside Nvari, her hand resting on the crystalline surface of his arm. The contact sent strange sensations through her neural implant, fragments of memories that weren't her own, of centuries of vigilance, of watching civilizations rise and fall while maintaining the eternal guard. Transfer window in 10, 9. Whatever happens, she said to Nvari, they were wrong. Perfect order isn't the answer. It's the relationship between order and chaos that creates true beauty. 8, 7. Nvari's patterns pulsed in what Rena now recognized as agreement. Perhaps that was their final gift to us, though they never intended it. The understanding that only through cooperation between different ways of being can balance be maintained. 6, 5, 4. The geometric patterns had reached the control room now, transforming the walls around them into complex crystalline structures. The air itself seemed to be solidifying into mathematical patterns. 3. Winter's hand hovered over the final activation control. 2. Vale's fingers flew across his console, making final adjustments. 1. Nvari's patterns blazed with blinding intensity. Now. Director Winters slammed her hand down on the control. At the same instant, Vale executed his command sequence, and Nvari released a pulse of energy that made the air crackle with power. For a single, eternal moment, everything stopped, the tremors, the transformation, even time itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the power transfer hit. Light erupted from every surface, every screen, every crystalline structure. The geometry of the room twisted in impossible ways as energy flowed between human and alien technology, between order and chaos, between past and future. Rena felt her neural implant overload with sensory input, bombarding her with fragments of both human and geometric being memories, centuries of history, of conflict, of understanding gained and wisdom earned. When the light faded, the control room was transformed. Not into the perfect geometry of the architects, but into something new, a harmonious blend of human and crystalline technology, of organic curves and mathematical precision. Through the windows, they could see the same transformation spreading across the colony, undoing the architect's influence and replacing it with something that honored both species' nature. The deep harmony from below had changed too, becoming softer, more complex, like a song with two melodies that enhanced rather than competed with each other. Containment field stabilized, Vale reported, his voice filled with wonder. Power flow it's perfect. The two systems are working together in ways I never thought possible. The architects are secure, Nvari projected. And more than that, they're at peace. Perhaps, in time, they too will understand that true perfection lies not in the elimination of chaos, but in its dance with order. Rena looked around the room at humans and geometric beings standing together, no longer separated by fear or misunderstanding. So what happens now? Director Winters smiled, running her hand along a console that was now part crystal, part traditional technology. Now we learn. We grow. We guard. Together. Together, Nvari agreed, his patterns shifting to colors Rena was beginning to recognize as joy. And perhaps, in time, other species will join us. Not as conquerors or victims, but as partners in maintaining the great balance. Outside, the crystalline forest sang its nightly song, but now it was accompanied by harmonics from the colony's power grid, creating music that spoke of both order and chaos, of both mathematical precision and wild creativity. It was, Rena thought, the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. She had come to this world hunting what she thought was a monster. Instead, she had found a truth that would reshape humanity's destiny, not through conquest or submission, but through partnership, through understanding, through the recognition that the greatest strengths often come from embracing differences rather than erasing them. As the dual suns of Kepler 742b rose over the transformed colony, their light caught and refracted through crystalline structures that were neither purely alien nor purely human, creating patterns that danced between perfect geometry and organic chaos. It was, Rena realized, exactly as it should be.